The head tube angle is the angle of your head tube. That's the part of the bike the fork fits into. Just imagine a line parallel to the fork extending into the ground. Now, head tubes on mountain bikes range from 62 to 71 degrees. So the first question, what would a lower number, something closer to 62, what would that usually mean? A, nimble steering. B, high-speed stability. C, both. D, neither. A lower number corresponds to a slacker head tube angle, like what you would find on a downhill bike or an enduro bike. And so the answer is B, high-speed stability. Now, the reason I said usually is because there are exceptions to everything. But typically, an enduro bike or a downhill bike is going to have a slacker head tube angle, and it places your fork in the optimal position for absorbing big old rocks and roots head on. At low speed, a slack head tube angle can feel a little bit floppy and cumbersome, but once you get the bike up to speed, it comes alive. Next question. When replacing the chain on a trail bike, what would you typically need to do concerning the new chain? A, determine if any links need to be removed. B, determine if any links need to be added. C, ensure it is in the locked position for installation. Or D, ensure it is in the engaged position for installation. Well, the answer is A, you're gonna need to determine if any links need to be removed. Now, I said trail bike because on a long tail cargo bike or recumbent bike or a tall bike, you're probably gonna have to add links, if not attach two chains together. But on the vast majority of trail bikes, the chain is either gonna come the right size out of the box, or you're gonna have to remove a link or two to get it up to size, and you would do that with a chain tool. Now, there are ways to figure out how to size your chain, how many links have to be there, and that's a topic for another video. But having to add links to a brand new chain, that would be the exception, not the rule. Next question, if we consider a typical mountain bike helmet like this one, how many impacts is it designed to take before it needs to be replaced? Is it A, 1 impact, B, unlimited impacts, C, unlimited moderate impacts but only 1 heavy impact, or D, both A and C? Well, the answer is A, 1 impact. Mountain bike helmets are made sort of like cars where there's a crumple zone. Once the helmet cracks, it can no longer do its job. In a crash, the helmet's gonna compress, it's gonna crack, it's gonna deform. All of that is designed to absorb the impact and minimize rotational forces that are gonna cause concussion. Of course, we can split hairs. What happens if you drop the helmet on the workbench or on the floor? What happens if it gets knocked around in your car? You're gonna have to use your own judgment in those situations, or if you're riding past a tree and you sort of brush your head on it, it doesn't hurt. Nobody's really gonna give you a straight answer to those questions. But the bottom line is, if you are unsure if you need a new helmet, it's probably time to get a new helmet, and usually companies will do some kind of crash replacement so you don't have to pay the full price. So you have a mountain bike with hydraulic disc brakes. Why might you decide to bleed them? A, you're adjusting the brakes to install on a new stem. B, to clean the brake pads of contaminants. C, to synchronize the brake stops. Or D, to rid the brake system of air bubbles. Hydraulic disc brakes work hydraulically, and so they're pushing oil through the hose to push the pistons inside the caliper against the brake pads so that they will stop the bike. Now, these systems are sealed off fairly well, but not perfectly, and so air bubbles do make their way into the system, as well as contaminants. And so when we bleed the system, we're forcing air bubbles out and allowing fresh oil back into the system. Typically, you'll know that your brake system needs a bleed if the lever feels mushy. You see, air compresses, brake oil doesn't compress very much at all. And so you want those air bubbles out. You only want oil in there because, like I said, it doesn't compress much. So when you pull that lever, there's a really solid contact between the brake pad and your rotor without any air compressing inside the system. Next question, your cassette is attached to the rear hub of your mountain bike, and when your derailleur switches gears, it's actually switching gears along the cassette to create a different gear ratio. If you wanted to remove a cassette, how might you do it? A, a cassette tool and a chain whip. B, a cassette tool and a derailleur hanger alignment gauge. C, lock ring pliers and a bearing puller. D, none of the above. Well, if you answered C, lock ring pliers and a bearing puller, you would be absolutely wrong. It's actually a cassette tool and a chain whip. Now, the cassette tool fits into the lock ring on the end of the cassette and allows you to turn it. Problem is, when you start turning it, the cassette just spins around, and so you have to hold it still, and you can do that with a chain whip. Chain whip is basically a little metal bar with a chain attached to it, and you can wrap it around the cassette and hold it still. There are also cassette pliers, which do essentially the same thing. You hold the cassette still, and you use the wrench in order to turn the lock ring. Now, cassette tools don't always have a handle on them. Sometimes you have to attach a wrench, but same difference. There's a lock ring, and you have to hold it still. When a professional bike mechanic installs a tire, typically align this valve stem with the brand name on the tire. Why do they do that? Is it A, to make the valve easier to find? B, to aid in finding the cause of flats? C, because it looks professional? Or D, all of the above? The answer is D, all of the above. These are all reasons why a professional bike mechanic will almost always align that brand name with the valve stem. Now, this may sound superficial, but it basically takes no extra work to do. And if you've ever been trailside trying to find your valve stem, yeah, you can find it in a few seconds, but you can find it in less seconds if you know what to look for. Also, if you do damage your tire significantly, once you've removed it from the bike and you have it out on the workbench, you might want to go back and inspect the rim and see if it's damaged as well. If you know how the tire was aligned on the rim, you know what part of the rim to check. Finally, it's just consistent. It looks professional. A good bike mechanic is going to take pride in their work. And if you go back and see what they did, you're going to want to see sort of the calling card of a professional bike mechanic on that wheel. So this next question's a little bit controversial, but not very. If you are riding a trail and you encounter a muddy patch and you care about this trail, what is the absolute worst thing that you could do? Is it A, ride directly through the center of that muddy patch? B, bunny hop over it? C, ride slightly off trail to avoid it? Or D, manual through it? The answer is C, ride slightly off trail to avoid it. I did an entire video on this, and it's pretty hard to dispute. If you keep riding around the edge of a muddy patch, it just makes that muddy patch bigger, and eventually you have this big bulb in the middle of the trail. Now, when trail builders go back to fix that muddy patch, not only do they have to fill in this area and maybe rock armor it, but they also have to renaturalize the area in the woods that you continue to encroach upon. And so it doubles their work. Now, again, this is controversial. I've had people strongly disagree with me on this, but the simple fact remains that the smaller the area they have to repair, the less work it's going to be. So you install a fresh set of brake pads in your bike. You've already put everything back together, you reset your calipers, you take your bike off the stand, and now you're ready to go for a ride. What should you do first? Is the answer A, apply a thin layer of brake oil to your rotors? B, rotate your front and rear calipers to ensure they wear evenly? C, bed in the new pads by stopping the bike repeatedly with increasing intensity? Or D, bed in the new pads by vigorously pulse stopping at least 5 times? Well, the answer is C, bed in the new pads by repeatedly stopping the bike with increasing intensity. When you first install your brake pads and you squeeze the brake, barely anything happens. It doesn't even want to stop the bike. You have to bed in those pads by distributing evenly a thin layer of material from the brake pad onto the rotor. And you don't want to do that by just slamming on the brakes. You want to do it lightly, and then you want to keep doing it at increasing intensity. So maybe ride the bike 10 or 15 miles an hour and lightly apply the brakes very steadily. Then do it again and maybe pull a little bit harder and continue that process until the bike stops normally. Now, if you were to just go really fast and just slam on the brakes, it's probably going to deposit a whole bunch more material on one spot of the rotor than the others, and that's not going to be good. You're going to get all sorts of weird braking behavior. And so you want to bed in your pads steadily and evenly by doing it with increasing intensity. So now that we know a little bit about head tube angles, let's see if you were paying attention. What type of bike would typically have a steeper head tube angle? A downhill bike. B, an enduro bike. C, a dirt jump bike. Or D, none of the above. Well, for this question, I purposely left out cross-country bikes because that's too easy. Those do have a steep head tube angle. The answer is actually C, a dirt jump bike. This seems counterintuitive when you consider what dirt jump bikes are for, but actually dirt jump bikes rarely go on very technical terrain. It's always very smooth, and so the fork does not have to be positioned for absorbing bumps. Rather, it needs to be very nimble and twitchy so you can make little micro adjustments and carve up a lip. It's also worth considering that dirt jump bikes don't typically go that fast. You might disagree with that. It looks like people are going really fast when they're hitting jumps, but it's nothing compared to how fast an enduro bike or a downhill bike is going on a straightaway. And so just like a BMX bike actually, dirt jump bikes have steep head tube angles, just like cross-country bikes do. So that's the last of our questions. How many of them did you get right? I tried to choose a wide variety of questions covering a lot of different topics in mountain biking. We are all about education here, and so let me know if you want to see more videos like this. I can get into the specifics of any one topic, or we can do random questions like we did today. If you like learning, you might like to follow Berm Peak on Substack. All of these videos get published there 2 weeks in advance, and we oftentimes have an article that accompanies the video providing more context. We also have many standalone articles written by some of the most interesting voices in mountain biking. Even if you sign up on our free tier, you will get freebies here and there. You'll also be helping me and possibly yourself break free from the algorithm. I hope you enjoyed these mountain bike quiz questions. If you know somebody that can learn from this video, please share it with them. I hope you learned something, and if you didn't, I hope you at least found this video entertaining. Thanks for riding with me today, and I'll see you next time.